Good morning, everyone. This is RJ Kelly, founder and chief visionary officer, Wealth Legacy Group. And you've got the handsome Dr. Nick Ifantidis, who is beaming in live from his home office. Grateful to also Daniel Amaro. Daniel is the leading partner over at Clarinet Solutions, LLC, and has been the backbone of our technical team. Both he and then some other really great technical compadres did a Tuesday session that you're going to want to listen to on basically ways you can get technology in for, whether it's in the family, with your business, with your team, whatever that might look like. Also looking for new clients or customers. Also want to thank Cameron Colleen. Cameron is a chartered financial analyst who is from the pristine firm, or the firm of City National Rockdale. We're going to be hearing more from him, and I'll be presenting some other things in with Cameron. But in the meantime, I want to get to showing my screen, and theoretically, this should get us there. So first of all, gang, there you are. When do things return to normal? Quote, air quotes, normal. That's why we've got Dr. Nick on to talk about, from a health standpoint, what can we expect going forward? And that's why Cameron and I are going to be sharing with you as well. When does the economy get back to normal? Now that we are up at 15 million on unemployment, and potentially we may have as many as 25% unemployed. Briefly, what's that going to look like? So I want to remind you, first of all, you all that are joining us are on mute. You have a chat box. We're going to wait to answer questions until the end. We found out yesterday that going back and forth between the chat box, we had so many questions yesterday that I was constantly back and forth in the chat box. And we found that that created some really difficult technological issues on the slides. So we're not going to do that. I also want to remind you that this is not what we do for a living. So I've been grateful for our 18 subject matter experts that have been with us this week. And just want to remind you that if we've got a technical glitch, just expect that. That's because we don't do this for a living. But we're here because the concern, and at Wealth Legacy Group primarily work with privately held business owners that are pre-liquidity. That is, they have not sold the business yet, although they may be wanting to, and especially now. Once we get through this cycle, they may be wanting to sell the business more than ever. But the concern is, if we lose the number of businesses that have been projected to be lost, in addition to the lives that are being lost to the COVID-19 virus, the good news there is that number is far less than what has been projected. In fact, we had a session with some of our elected officials on Wednesday that basically said that, hey, we've probably overreacted. The numbers that we were relying on to give us our destination have been badly skewed. We, in fact, will not have 56% of Californians coming down with COVID-19, but that's the good news. And so still stay at home and still wear your mask and go outside. So do those good things. But from a business standpoint, we don't even know yet how many businesses will not be able to open their doors back up again. So that's why yesterday we talked about the different financing programs that are available, different loans that are available, including the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Plan. So if you want more information, be sure and listen to the session from yesterday. And the point of this, though, is we're doing this to try and save businesses, and in effect also then save tens of thousands of jobs. That's why we're doing this week. That's it. That, in a nutshell, is how do we save the businesses that can then continue to provide jobs for Americans all across the country. We've got now hundreds of you have signed up and are with us. We're grateful for that, and so we feel like we're making a difference. If I haven't said that yet, my name is RJ Kelly. I'm founder and chief visionary officer of Wealth Legacy Group here in San Diego. We've got clients in 19 states. We deal with issues of succession and business transition planning. We deal with helping clients to eliminate the tax on the sale of appreciated assets, or if nothing else, defer that tax recognition for 30 years. Philanthropy is a huge part of our lives. My personal life goal is to facilitate $1 billion for philanthropy So I pray, please God, give me a long life. We crossed 100 million in August of 2012, and most of that is money that has been redirected from that would have been going to taxes, that involuntary philanthropy, and directing it towards voluntary philanthropy. And guess what? Good news, that's fine with the government. And 51 years ago, they passed a tax act that has a whole bunch of things in there that can help us do that. But unfortunately, most advisors are not aware of it, or they don't pay attention to it. So let's see what else we need to touch on before we get to our speaking. We have recorded every day. We've gotten a massive number of emails asking us for copies of both the visual as well as the audio. We have this on SoundCloud. An email went out to everybody yesterday, so that listed all of the different sessions. There's a link to all the videos in there. There's a link to all the audios in there. So thank you to Olha Martinez and also to Ashley Pollard, who are two of our team members at Wealth Legacy Group, for really going to bat and pulling all this stuff together. So you should have all of that. But send us an email. Send it to me, rj@wealthlegacygroup.com on your screen. If you have a question, if you want to be in touch with any of our speakers, whatever, send us an email and we'll make sure that we respond. Please be patient because we're getting buried. But anyway, I'm excited that we've been able to be helpful. Okay, anything else? Most important, I'm going to ask Daniel to share a 33-second video from the San Diego Food Bank. Normally, the San Diego Food Bank is providing meals to 1 out of 6, 1 out of 7 that are food insecure in San Diego because of the COVID-19 issue. It's gotten far worse than that. It could be 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 that are providing food through the food bank. We have, through the generosity of many of the listeners already, we have been able to generate almost 6,400 meals that we'll be able to provide through the food bank. I would love to get another $1,200 of donations. So if you have been listening to us and if you have not made a donation yet to the food bank, you should have a link that you've been sent in that link that went out last night. There's a link to the food bank. Please go there. Please click, and we're asking at least $25, but really any amount. I know we had a friend of mine in Tennessee just sent $100. Thank you, Karen, not to call you out, but that's just so sweet. You don't even live in our community and you're helping us make a difference here. Another wonderful business advisor, Jim, who also sent $100 this morning. And so please keep those donations coming in. Let's get to 10,000 meals that we can share through this community, through our wonderful food bank. It's extraordinary what they're doing. So will you help us raise this last $1,200 so we can finish providing that 10,000 meals through the food bank? Will you please do that? If this has been any help to you at all, please follow that link, make a donation. But Daniel, would you please just share that short clip for us from the food bank?
All right, RJ, do you mind stopping the share there and I can get going here?
Okay. Like I said, this is not what we do for a living, at least for me.
Okay, all right, and we're going now. Let me know when you can see it, RJ.
We've got it there. Go to full screen.
The Jacobs and Cushman San Diego Food Bank and our North County Food Bank chapter need your help during the coronavirus pandemic. Please help us feed families who have lost their incomes and senior citizens struggling to put food on the table. We have 2 ways you can help. Sign up to volunteer at sandiegofoodbank.org/volunteer or make a financial gift securely online at sandiegofoodbank.org. It takes a community to feed a community, and with your help, we'll get through this together.
Amen to that. And speaking of amen, I also want to wish a good Friday to the couple billion folks in the world that this is a very precious time of year. And so wishing you all a happy Good Friday, and more importantly, a wonderful Easter as we celebrate the burial, the crucifixion, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. And Nick, this is a good pivot to you because Dr. Nick Ifantides is a wonderful blessing to this community, Chief Medical Officer, among other things. I know, Dr. Nick, you are on the hot wire to the White House. In fact, you, even just before you logged on, you were in another huddle meeting with our county supervisors. The whole community is really owes you a debt of thanks and gratitude for your commitment to serve and make a difference. So this is going to be a very sort of unscripted part of our presentation here. I know you're just going to speak from the heart. I also know you're a follower of Jesus and appreciate your being a man of faith as well. So what would you like to share with us here in the community? Because we're hearing, gosh, will we be able to get back to our offices by the end of this month? Will it be perhaps the end of next month? We're seeing New York, the reduction in the number of hospitalizations. Unfortunately, there will be probably a higher death rate yet there, but the number of hospitalizations is going down. I saw that they actually had released some ventilators to give to other areas, which I thought was quite extraordinary when the governor announced that. So we're asking, when do we get back to normal from our lives here in San Diego and beyond?
Good morning, RJ, and good morning to everybody who's watching this both live and recorded. And first, I have to say thank you, RJ. I look forward to meeting you in person someday. Haven't had that opportunity.
And I do as well.
I am very thankful that Supervisor Gaspar introduced us, and I'm happy to do that and spend this time with you all today. So I just want to say thank you for that, and thank you for this opportunity. Secondly, couple personal things. Jim Floros, who runs the food bank, is my Greek brother from another mother, and it just warms my heart to know that you are combining education with nourishment to those in our community who need it the most. It just touched my heart to see him and integrate it here. And before I get into the real meat, I just also want to acknowledge what a sacred day today is for all of us who are believers. And I am not ashamed to profess that I truly see myself as a believer who just happens to be right now the Chief Medical Officer of San Diego County. I am absolutely convinced that God has spent my entire life preparing me for exactly this moment. And I'll quickly just say, from a little bit of a personal perspective, and those of you who might have interest, you can go to my Facebook and see the testimony. Part of what makes me so passionate and tender-hearted about this is that I've seen this movie before. You all recall the H1N1, which was the last global pandemic. You may or may not recall that the first official case in the world was confirmed here in San Diego. And I doubt that any of you know that don't know me personally, that my own dear father, George, was actually the third confirmed fatality from that pandemic in 2009. And so a big part of what drives me and a big part of what I'm so passionate about is using my own life experience and the pain that I went through in order to prevent that from impacting others. My biggest goal in doing what I do for the county and the 3.3 million people of San Diego is the notion of I am passionate about preventing the preventable so that we can be positioned to deal with the inevitable. Too much of our life is spent reacting to preventable things as a society rather than preventing the preventable. I don't want us to be distracted from our capacity to deal with the things of life that are inevitable. Having said those things, I want to get to the context, and RJ, I'm even going to touch on a couple things that you said in your intro because they're all very germane and I have no notes. All of this is unscripted, and consider it just a pair of lips attached to my heart. First off, folks, especially knowing that today we are talking about the issue of commerce and the well-being of so many economically and from a financial lens, I have to confess to you all, and I haven't said this, you're going to hear this publicly here for the first time if the opportunity arises at one of the frequent live press conferences. I think at some point I intend to say this for everybody to hear. I had never imagined as a physician that I would ever be in the position that we are now. where we have made decisions at a regional level that mirror in some ways those at a national level, but I'm just going to focus on San Diego County, which represents 1% of America's population. I could never have imagined that we have made decisions with a passion of preserving life and saving people's capacity to literally physically exist. But at the same time that we have done that, we have caused economic duress, hardship, and frankly, devastation. And I want you all to know, none of my colleagues at the county do not take any of this lightly. But truth be told, had we not made some of the decisions that we have made in terms of the directives of putting in place these social distancing efforts on a regional basis, we would have had the blood of thousands of people on our hands. But by doing what we've done, you know what is ironic? We have the blood of a shattered economy on our hands instead. And I realize that. And it's a very, very difficult situation that we are navigating, unprecedented, nothing that I have ever expected, but exactly the reason that I prayerfully for myself navigate every one of these decisions with a posture of dependence on wisdom that is beyond my own. The irony of us doing what we are doing to save people's lives at the same time shattering people's economic stability at all socioeconomic levels. I have wept with some of my colleagues who are moguls in real estate who have had to lay off thousands of people. My own physical brother lost his job. We don't take these decisions lightly. And I could say so much more, but I'll leave it at that, hoping that you all catch the flavor. And RJ, I want to respond to something and do so graciously, and I did not have the opportunity and probably won't have the time to go back and hear what the legislators said. But I would graciously take issue that we have overreacted. I think that very essence that people are safer and that folks are where they are is exactly because of the aggressive, proactive stance that we have taken in our region to protect lives and to prevent what we have seen unfold in other parts of the world. And so, obviously, and I'm open to answer questions about that, but the fact that things are not as bad as we expected is exactly the outcome. That is the fruit of the decisions that have been made. And it brings up a very interesting principle because it is so hard to quantify the things that we do to prevent the preventable. Built into that very equation is that when you prevent preventable things, how do you capture? How do you quantify? And maybe the delta between what is being experienced versus what we expected, I'm not saying that that's the evidence, but when you look at what other countries have gone through at both ends of the extreme, Italy that was caught off guard, certainly China and Wuhan that had no idea what was happening to them, even parts of our own country, folks, I don't ever want San Diego to get close to the point where we are concerned that we have enough ventilators for those who need them. So having said all of that, I'm going to now officially, for a couple minutes, with that context, officially answer the question that RJ invited me here to do. And I'm going to do so again from a paradigm perspective. When are we going to return to normal? Friends, I would submit to you, we are never going to return to normal in the sense that this crisis, I would submit, hear me out, has its benefits in that it will lead to some transformative things that are, in my opinion, potentially positive that will be sustained. Now, I do not say that with anything but mindful, again, consideration. How much more can I illustrate that of using the words that I did before, which are pretty graphic? But yes, I do have the blood of a shattered economy partially on my hands, and I own responsibility for that. But the thought that I have, forgive me, I forgot to turn off the home line. The thought that I have is that never could I have imagined being in this situation, and we will get through it. But the new paradigm that we will have as a result of getting through this circumstance, folks, I can guarantee you, will prevent us from ever, quote unquote, going back to the same normal. I'm going to get back to the economic issue in a second, but here is the point, part of the point that I would love for you to grasp. And I can illustrate it really quickly in the context of healthcare delivery. What has occurred over the course of the last month in terms of increasing access to medical telemedicine consultations, where everybody in San Diego, whether or not you have a doctor, whether or not you have health insurance, to be able to pick up a telephone and almost instantly have access to the appropriate virtual medical advice that you need to help you navigate the healthcare system in a responsible, appropriate way, I will submit, in the long term, is going to be very valuable, because a big part of the dilemma of the American sick care system is that people were utilizing it inappropriately. The emergency room is not where people should be going for sniffles and coughs. The emergency room should not be utilized the way that pre-COVID most of us had utilized it. Having said that, just a couple moments more to say, look, to the real issue I sense that is on hand for some of you, if not all of you, who are facing the economic challenges. When I say I don't think we're ever going to go back to normal, folks, I, of course, am mindful that some of you are just hoping to get to the point where, quote unquote, you know, things return to the way they were in terms of income streams and, you know, your service lines and business lines and all the things that you are a part of. To me, knowing that this is potentially going to be a new paradigm, I think in the midst of the time that some of us are locked down and have more time than usual because there isn't all the kind of almost consequential, or I should say inconsequential, social interactions that come with us being out and about, you know, I really feel people have a lot more time on their hands. For those of you who have that experience, this would be an incredible time for you to thoughtfully, if you're a fellow believer, to prayerfully reimagine what it is that you are doing and how perhaps you can do it into the future. I don't know that we're ever going to return to normal again. Are we going to return to a point where we will be able to resume the extent of human interaction that we had before? Absolutely. But I don't think it's ever going to be the way it was. And please forgive me if in any way this sounds offensive, you know, the expression of lemonade from lemons. For me, as a believer, the opportunity that we have to grow and mature through our pain. I never look at painful circumstances as being in and of themselves what it's about. I've used the example of my own father. That pain has led me to enhance my passion and focus and advocacy for San Diego. I had no idea that was going to be the case in June of 2009 when I clung to my father as he took his last breath. But that's where I am today. And so I would encourage you all, embrace the fact that we will resume life, but I don't know that it will be the same. And truly, the last thing I will say before turning it back to RJ is something that we've been messaging the last couple days at the county is the realization that I don't think people quite fully realize that when it comes time for us to loosen all of these social distancing issues, it's not going to be a flip of a switch back to the way it was. And it's too complicated to get into here. And you need to know we are working with international leadership of master actuaries like Dave Vaccine and UCSD and San Diego State in modeling all of these things out. But when we return to normal, we are going to have to basically gradually turn the dial back down. A lot of that is going to be influenced by a lot of things, including the availability of testing, to know whether or not folks are immune, incremental commercial return. And this is something, again, just a little strategic heads up. And I'm so sorry I can't yet give you dates. But some of you might be thinking, oh, I just need to make it until this exact date and time. Folks, it may not be like that. We may have to turn the dial down in a way that is incremental and gradual to allow the return to, quote unquote, the baseline of open human interaction in a way that prevents the possibility that we have a second spike, or because we did such a good job of protecting human life initially, that we won't get into the place of putting human life at risk subsequently. RJ, I have a feeling that I may have gone long, but I wanted to get all of that on the table. Thank you.
So good. So good, Dr. Nick. Thank you. And we will be having a live Q&A, or well, I'll be hitting, we've been getting some good chats, good questions coming in. For example, one of our listeners wants to know when we'll be able to go back to the beach and reopen the oceans and the pools and other things. So we'll wait to tackle those questions until our Q&A time. I also want to let our listeners know that Dr. Nick he might have to disappear on us at a moment's notice. That's just part of the deal. The other thing is that I understand that, Nick, you're saying that the rainstorms actually affected your calling in, so your phone went down once on a prior call as well. So if you disappear momentarily, we'll expect you to come back. That'll be great. But that's really good stuff. I mean, whether we're going to be no longer, I was listening last night, someone was saying that we may not have a handshakes anymore. It may be back to, not even a fist bump. Maybe we'll be doing elbow bumps from this point on. I saw an enterprising couple that were doing ankle bumps. Okay, what's that look like? But, one of the things that Dr. Nick was talking about was a comment, it reminded me of a comment from Britt Hume. Britt is a political correspondent and a reporter that I read one of his articles the other day. And he said, we may not have flattened the curve, but we've sure flattened the economy. And it was meant in humor, but with also, again, an observation there. But one of the reasons I wanted to ask my friends from City National Rockdale, and particularly Cameron Colleen, in addition to the fact that he's Irish. So, I mean, you got to love the Greeks and the Irish. Hey, it's just a good life, if there's Irish and Greeks. But one of the reasons I wanted to ask my friends from City National Rockdale to come in and share is because I was listening to a presentation that they did a couple of weeks ago, and we've now updated it to just right now, fresh off the presses. Where are we at as a country economically? We're starting to see some recovery from a health standpoint, but what about the economy? And the fact that it's going to get worse before it gets better, what can we expect? And so I'm just going to tell you right now, there's some good news coming. But let me go ahead and theoretically, let's see if this will get us a share. And all right, terrific. So Cameron, are you still with us, I trust? I've got you on mute. Let's get you unmuted. And theoretically, there you go. So Very good. So City National Rockdale, for many in business, City National, the bank, has been a vaunted lender and advisor to the business owner space. They acquired an investment arm a number of years ago called Rockdale, and then in turn have been acquired by Royal Bank of Canada in the last few years, which just gives them incredibly deep pockets, gives them incredible world perspective and international perspective. I bring them in with our clients where their level of service and acumen is what I would typically find with financial advisory companies of 10 million or more of assets with our clients. But we're able to utilize City National Rockdale with $1 million, which is, again, that's no small potatoes for this Yakima boy, little kid from Yakima, but that's a much smaller number than 10 million. So I've learned so much from them over the years and appreciate their guidance and wisdom for our clients and our wealth management side. So Cameron, great to have you with us. Let's talk about when do things return to normal, if they will, in the economy. So my friend, let's go with you.
Thank you, RJ. And if you flip to the...
And theoretically, we should be able to get the slides. We ran into this issue yesterday where the slides were not willing to cooperate. So let's see if we could get it to work today. Here we go.
Yeah, so thanks, RJ. So the good news is we are starting to see what appears to be some peaking of the cases. We're seeing that in New York City. It's looking like Italy and Spain are on the other side of that curve. And the markets took notice, as many of you probably noticed. It's been an excellent week in the markets, best single week since the 1970s this week in the markets. So they're liking that news. We're continuing to see Washington step up. It's looking more and more like there's going to be additional stimulus. That's hard to believe. It should be, because $2 trillion has already been poured into the economy, but we're likely to see an additional $1 to $2 trillion come out of Washington, and the markets have also really liked that. So there's some good news that has come out this week. Markets have reacted positively. The end appears to be in sight, although not here yet, and so hopefully more positive news to come.
I'm going to take it out of full screen mode. That seems to be inhibiting our ability to move the screen or move the slides. So one of the things that most people are not aware of is this is not just an economy that has been devastated by the COVID-19 virus. In fact, what started was, if you will, a mini war between the Saudis and Russia and the US in oil production. And so with us as being right now the leading country in oil production, but ours is a more expensive type of oil with coming from fracking. And so the Russians and the Saudis decided to take us under. And so that's what first happened to hit the economy. Then we saw the corporate interest rates in terms of dropping, and the market, literally the liquidity, just the air left the room. And so part of the concerns was, and where this volatility in the market was occurring, is because that all of a sudden things dried up. And so now was there fear that the companies would stop paying their dividends, their bonds, would stop paying out money. And then, oh, by the way, then we've got this COVID-19 thing. So it's really been more than just one issue that we've been dealing with in the market. It's actually been three.
Yeah, and so for those of you that follow City National Rockdale, you may have seen these dials before. We call them our speedometers. And usually we have 20 of them that we look at on a monthly basis that really lay out different levels of economic data and our projection for how those are going to look over the next 3 to 6 months. Obviously, in the extremely unique time that we're in currently, we've had to create some new dials. So we've created 9 new factors that we're looking at that relate specifically to the virus and how the virus is affecting the economy and the markets. And so this is the first 3 of those 9, looking at the spread and the mortality of the virus, the testing that's being done domestically, and the overall policy response. And we're looking at it on a weekly basis. So if you see on the screen, and I know it's kind of small, but the dotted line is where it was last week, and the filled in line is how we view it this week. So you'll notice an improvement across the board, although we still see the spread and the mortality as a red or a negative. It is slightly improving from last week. As I mentioned, it's looking like there's some peaking that's going on, specifically in New York City, with other states to follow. Testing continues to be not enough in our view, but we're getting better and better with that each week. So again, slight improvement there. And as I mentioned previously, we at the firm are very, very positive on the policy response. We think a very good response so far with the Fed and the stimulus CARES package. So we got very high grades so far.
Wanted to share another slide that, and again, I apologize that this isn't bigger. Let me see if I can actually boost the size on it a little bit. But one of the things that I found this helpful was understanding where we've been. And as Dr. Nick said, hey, we've been here before. We've read this book before. We've seen this movie before. And understanding the difference between types of recessions, and by the way, if you start hearing the media talk about Great Depressions and stuff, just change the channel. It is all about fear and uncertainty, and they're just trying to get your eyeballs hooked and your brain hooked and get you really frightened. So if you hear a newscaster talking about depression, change the channel. We've been here before. There are 3 different kinds of recessions. That's what we're looking at. And first of all, there's what's called a structural, or it's something that might be systematic is another name for it, meaning that there's something wrong with the system. And yes, the healthcare system right now is being sorely taxed, but what I'm referring to is back in 2007, 2008, 2009, during the 15 months where we had our economic crisis of great magnitude, by the way. The issue was the banking system was broken. And we saw that with some of the major banks that, in fact, went under. There was another lack of liquidity. One of the things that Fed Chair Bernanke, at that point, they sat on the sidelines and were waiting it out. And an interesting interview I heard several weeks back, former Fed Chair Bernanke, along with the current Fed Chair, Jay Powell, were saying one of the great lessons that they learned from the prior 2008 debacle was to not wait, to come in with all guns blazing, which is why we see this $2.2 trillion package from the White House and Congress. We see this $4 trillion that the Federal Reserve is pledging and making available in the market to provide liquidity. That's why the markets have been recovering here these last couple of weeks. And so if you look at, in terms of the decline of the market, this is specifically measuring the Standard & Poor's 500, the 500 largest companies in America. During those structural changes, such as we saw back in 2008, on average, the loss is 60% reduction in the S&P. But if you look at the cyclical, meaning that it's natural for the market to go through recession. It's natural for every country to go through a time of recession. That's just what happens. And many times it's healthy for the economy. That on average, 28%, but for something that's what we would refer to as an event-driven recession, such as we're in right now, this is an event-driven recession. It's even less, it's 26%. But what I really want to draw your attention to is how long on average it takes for the market to be in recovery mode, both while we're in the experience, as well as when we get out of the experience, when in this case, the virus is contained. So you can see it's the lowest by far. On average, it's only 8 months. And on average, it's only 13 months in terms of entire recovery. And we're going to see in a minute how the economy, how the S&P index has done, both 12 months after once a pandemic has been contained, and then 24 months. And so this is not the time to be going to cash and stuffing cash under your mattress. It's not, I would submit, it's not time to be completely in bonds either. In fact, for a number of our clients, we've actually been making measured moves back into the equity markets, and they've been getting rewarded for that. So that's something I hope you find helpful and encouraging. I know I certainly did as well. Okay, back to you, Cameron. I think this is your slide.
Absolutely, and a big key to us, as I mentioned previously, and I'll get into some of our specific economic projections here in just a moment, but a big key in our mind is the testing. The minimum amount that we think is necessary is 750,000 a week. We've now passed that, which is good news. That's positive. Mark has reacted positively to that as well, but we really are not there yet. We think in order to get things back opened up, get the economy started gradually, we're going to need to get that number more like 1.25 or even 1.5 a week. So we still have room to grow, but we're moving in the right direction when it comes to testing, and we really feel that is one of the key elements that's going to allow us to actually open the economy back up.
So this is the slide I was referring to just a moment ago, and you look at, we have had previous viral outbreaks, including SARS has been mentioned a number of times, and most recently Zika. You look at the duration, how long those have lasted during the time before there was a containment, and it's so 62 days, 2 months basically is the average. And while it's going to be some time before we have actual vaccines to be utilized, there's some prophylactic experiments that have been going on. We've looked at the hydroxychloroquine, the medication that's been used for, what's my, oh heavens.
Lupus
what's
and
that?
other autoimmune.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Nick. And also for malaria, that was the word I was trying to get to. There's some of the, I've taken hydrochloroquine myself when I've gone overseas to help prevent malaria. But the point of the story here is a couple of months. And Dr. Nick, I'm going to ask you this question and then we'll come back to it during our time of Q&A. But one of the things I've been noticing is the number of commentaries that just by virtue of the fact of temperatures warming up and it's getting into summer and fall, that might be doing more to help curtailment of the virus even than medications at the present time. But let's come back to that when we have our Q&A. So, but here's the thing to look at. 12 months after the containment of these various viral outbreaks, 23% is the average growth in the S&P index. And 24 months out, it's 35%. So again, the point is we can't tell when the market is going to start going back up. We've certainly had some nice couple of days here in this week, but the point is you need to be there before the market starts going up. And for the most often people this is why you need to talk to professional advisors, whether they're registered investment advisors such as we are, or whether there's someone else that is a advisor in that space that can give you a broad picture. But the fact is, you need to be already in the boat before the boat leaves the shore. And unfortunately, I've met clients who came out of 2008 who had sat in cash for 10 years and missed the entire bull market that followed. Don't let that be you. Okay, Cameron, back to you.
So let's assess the damage, so to speak. I want to speak for a minute about what our projection is in GDP. And our projection is shared by many on Wall Street, and then I'll speak to the job loss specifically. So when we looked at this in mid-March, our projection was that we were going to have a flat first quarter and a negative 15% second quarter. As these shutdowns have extended and the economic damage has become more clear, we've now revised that down. We think it's going to be a negative 35% second quarter, which is truly historically devastating. If you look at the worst quarter of 2008, it was 8% lost in GDP, so 35% is an astounding number. The good news is we're fairly confident that it will be short-lived. We think it's going to be a severe recession in nature, but very short in duration. We anticipate a third quarter that, although negative, is much more modest, and a fourth quarter of 2020 followed by a first quarter of 2021 that is actually quite positive. We expect a bit of a rubber band effect, if you will, when it comes to demand. 70% of our economy is consumer spending, meaning you and me spending money. And there's going to be an incredible pent-up demand for that, in our view, given the amount of time people have been forced to stay home and the amount of time that the economy has been shut down. So as long as the stimulus and the government's response is strong enough, in our view, we do think it'll be a very short-lived recovery. We've now lost over 16 million jobs in 3 weeks. For perspective, in 2 years, from 2008 to 2010, we lost 10 million jobs. The unemployment rate is a lagging indicator. We only have March's information when reported. So when you see 4.5% unemployment, that's March. As of April, we're looking at probably 15% already unemployment. And assuming that this continues, we're probably at 20% unemployment at the end of the month. For reference, the Great Depression was 25% unemployment, so we're not quite there, but we're closer than we'd like to be. Again, we're pretty confident that it will be short-lived. As soon as we can start to open things up in some way, start to return to some resemblance of normal life. It may never be normal again, as Dr. Nick said, but some resemblance of that. We feel a lot of those jobs will come back online. So again, we feel it'll be short in duration, although expect severity. When you hear the numbers, they're going to be somewhat astounding. We think that that will certainly bleed over into earnings. We're just now entering earning reporting season for the first quarter. A lot of that won't be reflected yet, but once we see it in the second quarter, we would expect earnings to decline by 25 to 30% at a minimum, which takes us back to 2015 levels. So about a half a decade in corporate earnings growth lost in a matter of a month or two. But again, we feel it'll be fairly short-lived.
Here's a slide that I think is very encouraging as well. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger just so we can, oops, that's funny. So this is where I revert to the part that says this is not what we do every day for a living. So hopefully you can see this. This is measuring. Now, let's be honest, folks. I just don't trust the stuff, the information that we get out of China. The WHO has been bashed repeatedly for being a mouthpiece for China and just parroting things that, as it turns out, are absolutely untrue. But this data, there's no reason for this data to not be fairly accurate. And this is measuring the change in China's spending habits within their economy since the end of their Lunar New Year, which was in early February. So if you can look at this, so each of these lines here represents 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and 6 weeks after the end of their Lunar New Year. And look at their spending. If you look at their online spending, you look at their consumer spending, which is, Cameron just mentioned, anywhere from 69 to 72% of our economy comes from us consumer spenders. And so you could see the rapid recovery. In fact, it's now apparently, if you aggregate the spending with taking out the money that's being spent for rents and for automobiles and travel, if you take those out, the recovery of spending in China is over 92%, just literally within a short period of time. So will that same thing happen here in America? Very likely so. Of course, we've seen a tremendous increase in online spending. We're going to see other areas that are recovering. Restaurants might be lagging. I know there's some folks that even after we get the all clear from Dr. Nick, might be a little reluctant to go back and eat in a restaurant, my wife included, and I don't blame her for that. She's and a lot of others, but nonetheless, there'll be some lagging industries. But for the most part, our recovery should be what's called a V recovery, as opposed to what some have called a U recovery, which lagging, or it's certainly not going to be the L recovery that you hear about from some of the media that are, again, as I say, trying to scare you and just keep you watching the tube. So back to you, Cameron.
We share RJ's sentiment when it comes to the projection of how different industries will be affected domestically. It's not going to be by any means equal. There are going to be different industries that recover at different levels. Travel and hospitality, for example, I would expect a fairly low and slow recovery, as we've seen in those China numbers, whether they're real or not. We have seen that, and that indicated. It's important to recognize as an investment manager, as we are, just because there are different levels of recovery across different industries doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities in those industries to invest. Oftentimes the market overreacts to negative news, and even in a hospitality or a travel company, for example, there can be an attractive investment opportunity. So we're looking at all of it very, very closely, tracking the recovery across different industries and looking for opportunities for our clients to invest and to stay the course. Again, the response, I've heard the word bazooka used on television about the Fed's response. It's a fair comparison. They've announced unlimited quantitative easing. They've injected $4 trillion worth of cash into the economy, and really it was necessary. We were at a point about 3 weeks ago where there was extreme liquidity concerns in the fixed income markets, which then bleeds down to the domestic credit, and when credit freezes up, then you have a financial crisis, much like we had in 2008, to compound the health crisis and the economic crisis that we're dealing with. So they've stepped in a big way and prevented that. As of now, we're pretty healthy financially, although the economics are going to be pretty devastating over the next quarter. We've yet to see any sign of a financial crisis, which is extremely important. So again, we give very high grades to what the Fed has done so far.
Cameron, I'm going to skip ahead a couple slides just because we'll need to wrap up this part of it here in the next minute or so. But if you want to take these last couple of slides, and then we'll go to our Q&A time.
Yeah, no problem. RJ, if you want to jump two more to I'll talk about our playbook a little bit. So we've called this our late cycle playbook. We by no means knew that this virus was coming, of course we did. But what we did see about 12 to 18 months ago is we were very long in the tooth economically. We've been in a 11-year expansion. We're very clearly late in the economic cycle. So as a firm, our job is to protect our clients' assets, and as a result, we made some steps about 12 months ago that have really paid dividends for us now. We got rid of small company exposure, so in stocks, we got rid of our small company investments, got rid of our international investments, and really looked for more blue chip companies like Coca-Cola and Verizon, as opposed to the Facebooks of the world. And then as we've entered this crisis, we've raised cash for our clients so that they have some bullets in the chamber on the sideline, 15 or 20% to take advantage of opportunities that present themselves out there. So that's what a good investment manager should be doing for you, is looking at the economy and basing their decisions based on that to help protect your assets and stay the course. So in short, in closing, we think it's going to be a severe recession, a severe decline. You're going to see economic news that is mind-boggling, but we think it's going to be extremely short in duration. Unlike other recessions, we don't think it's going to drag on. We think it's going to be, as RJ referenced, what's called a V-shaped recovery, to where we're back to some level of economic normalcy in 2021.
So with that, thank you very much, Cameron. Let's go to what we call our questions and solutions. I'm going to tap into seeing what we've got here. So one anonymous attendee has said, no matter the reasoning, if it's been done to efforts of quarantining at home, I think cocooning is better. So, which I think what they're saying is, if it could be better or worse, why don't we choose that to be more conservative and stay at home so that we all come out of this with some improvements to ourselves, our families. Certainly we're seeing that has been one of the very positive things that's coming out of this. At least I think in most families, there's the same number of children still at present at home that has started this COVID cocooning, but we'll check on that later. And looks like almost all models have been, the actual outcomes have been less than what the models were predicting. Dr. Nick, is that your assessment as well? I know that the University of Washington had a major assessment that many have been following, and we're finding that they were overstating it. I know Governor Newsom said that we was projecting that 56% of Californians would have the virus, that we're well below that. So what's your take on this in terms of the models? And
quickly, RJ, I just need to restate, because it came in light of what you shared. By the way, what you guys just did was very educational for me. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Did not expect to be so enriched with regard to things that I've been thinking about. This virus, quickly, is so unique in that it is highly transmissible, and it has never infected the human race before. We have no immunity, we have no vaccinations, we have no medication. The quick analogy, think of being in a war in the front trench, and you have nothing at your disposal other than to hide. So the initial modeling, and I'm not making excuses for it, was it dead on? No. Was it on the side of erring towards caution with the primary motivation being life-preserving interventions? Yes. So I would not say that they were overestimates as much as conservative modeling for a once-in-a-lifetime challenge, even down the line of Zika, Ebola, SARS, and things. There are other factors involved. Some of those are new, but let me just put it this way. Some of them are so much more deadly that, frankly, the virus kills its host and as a result doesn't get as transmitted. What's so interesting about the novel coronavirus is that it is very infectious and potentially causes devastation, especially in the vulnerable populations. So the answer to that is, were the models, quote unquote, I would call them not overestimates. I would call them overly cautious, knowing how unprecedented and how truly unique and impactful this whole scenario is collectively. Thank you, RJ.
Absolutely. Question, let's put this one over to you, Cameron, and that is on the supply chain. That's one of the things that seems to be, we had so much of our supply chain connected to China, including our drugs. And so there's been issues with China holding the N95 masks under hostage that were being made by US companies there and not allowing them to be released to the United States. So how do you see the supply chain being affected going forward from China? Where will we move it? And back to America, will we use Vietnam? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so certainly there's been some issues, as you referenced, but all in all, there hasn't been a general disruption in the supply chain. So far it's been positive, but what I think it has awoken us to is how vulnerable we are if there were a disruption from China. And so I do agree with your statement that I do think it'll lead to more domestic production. I think it'll lead to more production in other places overseas. I think like many elements of this virus, it's pointed out some extreme blind spots that we have, both from a health perspective and an economic perspective. And I think one of those is how vulnerable we are to a disruption from China, even though we've yet to see it in any sort of meaningful manner yet.
Great. Dr. Nick, back to you. One of the questions has about the Bay and the closing of the Bay. Certainly understand the shutting down of parking lots and other things that might bring to a conflagration of people, but the water? And I also thought CDC had said that swimming in a chlorinated pool was fine, and yet virtually all the pools are shut down as well. So for many that live in San Diego, going out for walks on the beach or going out in the water on the paddleboard or whatever is kind of what helps them keep sanity. Any thoughts on when we'll see the ocean or the bays and such being reopened again?
Yeah, again, every one of these questions is so wise and nuanced. Let me just quickly try to respond that this is tough. It's a tough call because while we are sheltering in place or staying at home or whatever the terminology is that you want to use, cocooning, I haven't heard that one before, is the intent of that is social distancing. Some of you saw and recall the images, if you watch the news, the first weekend after St. Patrick's Day, when we had the things in place, the beaches looked, and it just so happened, by the way, that it was a warm weekend, almost like a summer weekend. The beaches looked like nothing had happened. And so I realized, and this is what I call playfully the porcupine mating ritual between health and politics. I think to be consistent where the policymakers landed, and it is difficult and it will not be forever, is to do everything that we could in terms of the gathering places where people literally would be coming in contact with each other in order to limit transmission. Personal exercise is critical. I just saw research this morning that came out that is looking at the vapor of breath of people running by each other, showing that there is the potential for transmission. So I could go on in answering this, but I think the bottom line is that all possible measures in order to facilitate appropriate social distancing have been put in place. In terms of when the date, again, it's a little bit too early for me to be able to tell you some of my internal thinking, but it will likely, again, involve a turning down of that dial, what things get opened up first and in what sequence and how we do that truly is yet to be determined. And then having heard the comments that we just heard, looking at things from the macro United States perspective, I think you all realize that there are parts of the country, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, New Orleans, Detroit, Chicago, Seattle, that really had their community transmission levels occur 2 to 3 weeks before ours. I will never forget the date that, in a sense, all of our directives were initially put into place because it was St. Patrick's Day. And there were some of us the weekend before that had a tremendous sense of urgency, knowing that the human contact in confined spaces was going to occur, as is the quote unquote cultural tradition in bars and pubs and so on and so forth. And so if you take a step back, we're already getting close to a month, and the benefits that we have observed are evident. The question of when we get to turn down that dial, I can just commit to you, those of us who are of faith and science are poring over those decisions, and for me, praying over those decisions constantly.
I can appreciate that, certainly. Cameron, question for you in terms of the effects the Fed investing or having available that $4 trillion into the economy. And Tom is asking, are we just printing money? Is that money coming out of here? Where's that money coming from? And what are the thoughts in terms of the impact on inflation? I mean, it's hard to imagine that this is going to have any kind of inflationary impact in the short run, simply because of what we're trying to do to shore up the job loss. But comments or thoughts from City National on where we might see inflation going as a result?
The simple answer to are they simply printing money is yes. It's digital, but it's definitely not coming from anywhere, so to speak. Yes, could that long-term lead to inflation? There's no question. But at this point, we just have to make it out of the storm. We're looking at more deflationary pressure than inflationary pressure in the short and medium term. And so long-term, is it a problem we're going to have to deal with? There's no question. But the thought is we got to make it through the eye of the storm, which is what we're currently experiencing.
In a minute, so think about this one. We've got a question about comparing China's spending with the U.S. spending or recovery of spending. In China, you've got a communist country where the government just says, okay, you're going back to work. In America, it doesn't quite work that way. So in a minute, think about the answer to this one. Can we connect the pent-up demand here in America and the record job losses we're experiencing? Can we draw parallels to the recovery of spending in China? And if so, again, that's a tough one to answer, I'm sure, but be thinking about that. I'm going to come back to Dr. Nick. And by the way, I know we're past our 10 o'clock hour. I figured that would probably happen. If you need to drop off, we entirely understand. Remember, this is all being recorded. All 5 days are being recorded. If you still don't have access to it, again, we sent out last night all of the sessions and also the SoundCloud recordings as well as the YouTube recordings. If you didn't get that, just send me an email, rj@wealthlegacygroup.com, rj@wealthlegacygroup.com. We are being inundated, and that's great. We love it. We will get back to you and get you anything you want. So Dr. Nick, telemedicine, are we going to see an expansion of telemedicine as a result of what we've been going through?
Let me be clear. Absolutely. To be efficient, let me just leave it at that, RJ. Absolutely.
Here's another one. You answered that one you were so effortless on that one. Let me give you another one right now, and that is California had a fairly low number of cases given the fact that we are a tourist destination. Were we just lucky that we had really healthy people that came to California, or is there any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Well, don't forget that there were already some national things in place, right, in terms of restricting travel, number one. And also, don't forget what I just said a moment ago. Folks, we're like 4+ weeks into this now. And so there are parts of Northern California that are a little bit further along than we are. But the fact of the matter, and also don't forget the things that were put in place with CDC, the initial cases that we had here in San Diego County were actually travel-related cases, individuals that we knew were infected or that we had in home isolation. You know, there were many people, I don't know if you all realize this, that we had put under mandated, if you would, 14-day quarantine periods in their homes prior to what we've done for the entire region. And so the fact that we had people incoming, there was a way that we were dealing with those, monitoring those, and tracking those. Again, sort of and I'm not saying this to brag, and frankly, it's other colleagues of mine like Dr. Wilma Wooten and Dr. Eric McDonald, that this is one of their many responsibilities. But all of that monitoring that we did until we broke that plane and I'll never forget the day, we did a special news conference just on that issue, the day where we had our first case in San Diego that could not be attributed to somebody either who was a traveler from out of the area, who had been on a cruise, or was somebody who had had contact with someone that was in one of those categories. And so I believe that the whole thing, you know, you all, and I say this lovingly, of course, everybody's focused on, the day we lowered what's called the non-pharmaceutical intervention boom and put all these things in place, literally at 12:01 on St. Patrick's Day. There was so much going on in our community prior to that. And RJ, if I made 20 more seconds, it's hard to say this in retrospect, but I will. I am so blessed that we live in San Diego County, and I will never forget a phone call that I got late night on January 31st from my medical colleague, Eric McDonald, that we in San Diego were going to, because of our partnership and the presence of Miramar Air Force Base, that we were going to be receiving evacuees from Wuhan, China, for those of you who live here who remember that. Folks, that was an amazing blessing, not only in terms of what we were able to do for those people, but it prepared our entire region. I've used it as an analogy of the spring training for the major league experience we're now part of. It was also like a vaccination in that it inoculated our community and allowed us to put all the logistic things in place to be prepared. And I say this with humility, but for those of you who are San Diego residents, I believe you are living in the most prepared, locked and loaded community in the United States. And there's a host of reasons for that, but you know, it's important for you to all know that we've been dealing with this really since mid-January, and preparations have been in place, a lot of which were happening, quote unquote, behind the scenes. But tourists and all those things were being tracked to get us to the point where we are today, that it's not as bad as it could have been.
That's a great word. Oh, so just having an attitude of gratitude is a great place to start, no matter any day, whether we're dealing with a crisis of this proportion or not. And talking about being prepared, I've got to just do very quickly a big shout out to our sponsors, and we've got a bunch more questions that we're going to be getting to in a moment. But our friends at Vistage, Dale Robinette's a dear friend. He is a master chair with Vistage. They have been one of our sponsors from the get-go on this. We're grateful for them. And if you're a business owner and you don't have a network of people that are in your, on your side of the table, you really need to consider Vistage. It's a peer-to-peer networking group, and just email my friend Dale there, dale.robinette@vistage.com, or give him a call, and you can talk about what can be done in terms of creating a network of other business owners. Jim Breland, who we work with over in Arizona, but managing vice president with Pacific Life. They're an extraordinary company, and so grateful for their participation, not just in this event, but in so many other things that we do. I own Pacific Life in my own portfolio, and I've got it there because they have some special products that are not just about dying, they are about creating tax-free streams of income. So retirement planning is critical and never more important than now, and that's one of the things that we do, and we use Pacific Life for some of their products in that. Thanks to a new friend, Chris Weissman from Home Street Bank. Chris and his colleague Casey were brilliant yesterday, along with Miriam from CDC Business Loans. But you'll want to listen to their comments on the PPP loan packages. There's also the emergency relief loans and microloans. There's a whole bunch of stuff. But Home Street has been phenomenal through this crisis in terms of helping business owners get practical answers, whether you're a client of the Home Street Bank or not. And then last, I've already been raving about my friends over at City National, and you got to hear just a small part of this wonderfully resourced, nuanced group of City National Rockdale with Cameron today. But this is one bright group of folks, and Cameron is right at the top of the heap on that one. So we're going to go back to some more questions here, and while I pause my share, and bear with me as I get back to one more place. Okay, and so again, this is not what I do for a living, gang, so I hear you impatience out there. When are we marking the start of COVID-19, both here in San Diego, Dr. Nick, as well as nationally? Do we have, I heard you say just a moment ago, January was when we were first preparing here in San Diego. Do we have any kind of reference points? One of our listeners asked the question.
It's amazing how amazingly wise every one of these questions are. Folks, the first time I heard about the Wuhan virus was on January 4th. I have a savant physician working for me, Dr. Christy Koenig, my EMS medical director. She is incredible, internationally recognized in this field. She called me on a Sunday afternoon and said, Dr. Nick, there's something going on in Wuhan, China, and it's not good. That was my initial first awareness of it, and again, with a heart of compassion, but also realism. I don't want to be political in any way. I think it's fair to say China had no idea what was happening initially. And so how much of it, and only God, in my opinion, knows how much of it was willful misleading versus them getting literally caught off guard. I think the way that they did is, again, a whole deeper conversation. They awoke to the reality of things in late December, that something was going on. I'm not in a position of national leadership, but I was made aware of it on January 4th, and the wheels started grinding. I will tell you all, and this is very symbolic for me. San Diego County was the second county, but by far the largest county in California, way ahead of the state to declare public health emergency. And we did that on February 14th. Valentine's Day. And I had a conversation with Supervisor Fletcher, and I said to him, because he was making the opening comments, please let the people know what we're doing today though it's very potentially perceived as overreacting, it's really an act of love for our community. We declared our emergency, folks, on Valentine's Day. Very early, we knew what was coming. And so more could be said about that, but I'll leave it at that, RJ.
You bet. Cameron, I know we're going to cut you loose as well, and probably Dr. Nick as well. But Cameron, I asked you a question a moment ago in terms of, is there a comparison that we can make between the Chinese economy and their return to spending habits, as well as where it's a totalitarian regime, versus here in America, which is anything but? Can we draw parallels, or where's the disconnect? Got any thoughts on that?
I would say the answer is a cautious yes, but with a huge grain of salt. You know, as you're referencing, it's a completely different political system, a completely different economic system. Culturally, it's very different. So there are some comparisons we can draw. You saw the slide where we are looking at some of the data, recognizing that a lot of it's probably not entirely factual. So there certainly is some comparison to be drawn, but it's definitely an apples and oranges situation.
Yeah. And while we're going to talk about go back to some of the healthcare issues here in a second as well. What was the question? I was going to fly over to you. Any comments on, thank you. I guess healthcare, we'll go back to Dr. Nick on this because there's some healthcare questions are piling up. And that is new best practices that we're going to take away from this pandemic, both fiscally and economically, as well as healthcare wise. So why don't we start, Dr. Nick, with you? Are we going to have some new things that we do as a result? I've read, for example, that likely the incidence of flu will be lessened because of the greater precautions that we are now learning to take, and even on how do we put the wipes over our mail and cleaning it off and cleaning off the counter surfaces. So Dr. Nick, first to you, and then back to you, Cameron, on that one. Will there be some changes in what we do fiscally and economically as a result of this as well? Dr.
RJ, thank you. And if I may, brother, I'm blessed to have done so, but I'm going to do something a little quickly unique here. I just scanned all the remaining questions, and if I may, I need to quickly answer several issues with one answer, because I'm so sorry. After I give this answer, I have to log off.
Thank you so much for your time.
I've got a price to pay for having spent the extra time now, but I've got, including two of our supervisors, that I need to get back in touch with. So let me just quickly say the following. Absolutely, there are incredible innovations, and that to me is not just the silver lining. I am convinced that this crisis is going to lead to incredible innovations, and as convinced as I am of that for healthcare delivery and transformative modeling in terms of what the world will look like in the future, I would just humbly encourage you all as economic stewards and business stewards and commerce stewards and all the things that you are part of, that you are so gifted with, that you be looking at this opportunity likewise. I also want to quickly address the whole issue of, did this virus come through sooner than we thought? It's possible, but unlikely. To me, the most important indicator, even though we haven't had enough testing capacity, is really the number of people who end up in intensive care units and critically ill. We did not have a disproportionate number in our region of individuals that were critically ill with pulmonary complications like has happened in other parts of the world where community transmission was occurring. And so though it is in theory possible, very unlikely that we had the virus transmission going on prior to us, quote unquote, being aware of it. Number three, and this is such an important point going to the broader context, because somebody very thoughtfully said, well, why don't we just in a sense sequester those who are high risk and those who are caring for them? Folks, when you consider that the vulnerability of our population that could literally, like my father did, have life-ending consequences to this infection, it is about 20% maybe depending on certain parts of our county where there is variations by zip code, right? Because of socioeconomic factors, disproportionate racial, societal, what we call the social influencers or the social determinants of health. It could be as high as 25 to 30%. The individuals who are at greatest risk, individuals with underlying medical conditions, the aged, individuals who have immune compromised conditions, if you put all those people into one quote unquote collective group of humanity, and all the people that touch those folks, it's almost all of society. And that's the whole point. And if I could illustrate quickly my own father's death, one of my nephews at the time had barely a sniffle. We thought it was a pure cold and a routine upper respiratory infection. But because of the nature of how virus infections work, it literally killed my father. So what we are doing is a collective approach, yes, to protect the most vulnerable, but the idea of being able to sequester and do what we're doing for just a limited portion of the population is totally impractical. Lastly, is this whole idea, and more evidence is coming out about what a high proportion of people who have this virus may not have any symptoms at all. The viral shedding, I can be infectious without even knowing it. And so all of these things are taken into consideration. So RJ, that was my best attempt, brother, to kind of glean some key principles from all these questions that are outstanding. I just want to say, God bless you guys. Thank you so much for what you are doing. If you're interested in more of the nuances of my own personal life journey, you know, there's a lot of media stuff recently, my Facebook, and I just look at this as a collective effort. Know that you are loved. Know that these very difficult decisions are not made by those of us who are faith-based without a lot of prayer and consideration. And yes, what an unbelievable situation for us to be in a situation that we are, where decisions to preserve life have unfortunately led to some economic devastation. But we will not only get through it, I am so filled with hope, anticipation, confidence, and enthusiasm for the future. So God bless you guys, and thank you, RJ, for this opportunity to share my heart and be part of this and to be so educated myself, okay? God bless
Dr.
you.
Nick, thank you so much. God bless you. Wonderful Easter, and I look forward to getting to have a cup of coffee with you when we all get to go outside. Boy, if you had not understood about Dr. Nick, I love this. He's a pair of lips attached to his heart. That's an incredible description. We're so fortunate to have a man of his character as well as his qualities. If you didn't get his email address earlier, just shoot us an email to our office, to send it to me, RJ at Wealth Legacy Group, and we'll be able to get you an email so you can be reaching out. We've got an astounding number of people that are still on the call and webinar. We've got an astounding number of questions that we just haven't had time to answer. I also want to thank Cameron Kille, who was just is a great partner, both in terms of presenting today, but also in terms of what City National Rockdale does. And again, thanks to all of our sponsors, Vistage, Pacific Life, Home Street Bank, City National Rockdale, Wealth Legacy Group. Folks, Wealth Legacy Group, yeah, we help clients on the wealth side, but it's all about legacy as well. And the fact is, we are all leaving a legacy. So please, as we come into this Holy Weekend and beyond, please think about how you can have a lasting positive impact in the lives of others, starting with your family, but of course, as well, back into this community. Who can you call up? Who can you send an email to reach out to, just to see how they're doing? And with all of that, this has been a privilege and an honor for us to be with you over this week. We've got some great material, great content. We've had wonderful speakers. So please check them out. If you still don't have a link to those, send me the email. With that, thanks so much for being with us. God bless. And this is about America Strong. We will get through this. As Cameron reminded us, we project a sharp decline in the market, but a strong rebound. That could be said about all of America itself. God bless. Thanks so much for being with us. Bye for now.